It began with the scent of lavender, a fragrance I despised but one she absolutely adored. Emily often brought home candles or sprays, so it wasn't unusual. But this time, the aroma wasn't coming from our house. It was clinging to her coat, faint but persistent, after she returned from working late for the third consecutive night. I didn't say anything at first, though I noticed her phone seemed to be glued to her hand, always placed screen down on the counter. Her laughter, louder and more genuine than I'd heard in months, was aimed at text messages, not at me or our kids. She would retreat into our bedroom and re-emerge 20 minutes later, dressed like she was auditioning for a role I never cast. "Big presentation," she explained one evening, brushing past my raised eyebrow and the glaring red lipstick. "Clients prefer a polished look." "Right," I murmured, struggling to mask my doubt. Her company sold software. Lipstick wasn't exactly a professional necessity over a conference call. The turning point came that Saturday morning when Emily walked into the kitchen wearing a baggy sweater I didn't recognize. "New?" I asked, motioning toward it. "It's old," she snapped, her voice sharp, almost defensive. "You just never notice anything." That line, it was her favorite deflection tactic, a way to put me on the defensive. But the truth was, I'd been noticing everything. Her newfound love for lavender wasn't the only change. Her behavior shifted, answers to simple questions became vague, and she carried herself like an actor juggling two scripts, unsure which lines belonged to which role. Sunday morning was the breaking point. Emily said she was meeting her sister for brunch. I didn't buy it. Her sister had been out of town for weeks, something Emily herself had complained about just days earlier. "Where are you meeting her?" I asked casually, pretending to scroll on my phone. "The Green Fig," she replied without hesitation, naming a trendy cafe. I smiled inwardly. She didn't know I had already called the cafe that morning. There were no reservations under her name or her sister's, so I followed her. It wasn't difficult. She wasn't expecting it. Her car led me to a hotel just outside of town. Not a luxurious spot for romantic getaways, but the kind of cheap place people use to avoid attention. My stomach churned as I watched her park, step out, and walk inside without a glance over her shoulder. She didn't hesitate. No uncertainty, no guilt. For 20 minutes, I debated whether to go in. Finally, I did. The receptionist barely looked up as I entered, which worked in my favor as I scanned the lobby. And then I saw it. Her lavender scarf draped across the back of a chair near the vending machines. My breath caught. I didn't need to see more. When I got home, I didn't scream or cry. I didn't even pour a drink, though I wanted to. I calmly packed a bag for myself and one for each of the kids. I didn't bother folding her laundry, washing the dishes, or leaving a note. By the time Emily strolled through the door the next morning, smelling of lavender and looking smug, we were gone. The kids and I had settled at my brother Mike's house by the time she realized we had left. Mike wasn't thrilled by the sudden intrusion, but the second he saw my face, his usual sarcasm vanished. "You all right?" he asked, handing me a beer as the kids disappeared into the living room to play on his old Xbox. "No," I replied flatly, "but I will be." My phone buzzed on the counter. Emily's name lit up the screen. I let it ring. She called again. And again. By the fifth attempt, Mike raised an eyebrow. "You going to answer that?" "Not yet," I said, taking a long sip of beer. I wanted her to stew in her confusion, to feel the same gnawing uncertainty that had plagued me for weeks. Her texts began pouring in, starting with concern and escalating to anger in record time. "Dave, where are you? Where are the kids? This isn't funny. Answer me." I said nothing. An hour later, the phone rang again, this time from an unfamiliar number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Dave!" Emily's voice screeched, frantic and sharp. "What the hell is going on? Where are you? Why aren't you answering your phone?" "A new number already?" I asked coldly. "Didn't think you'd go nuclear this quickly." "Don't play games with me," she snapped. "Where are my kids?" Her kids. The word stung, but I kept my tone calm. "They're safe. They're with me." She exhaled sharply, a mix of relief and frustration. "You can't just disappear like that. What's wrong with you? What's wrong with me?" I laughed bitterly. "Are you serious right now?" "I have no idea what you're talking about," she said, feigning innocence. You're acting crazy. Did something happen at work? Are you stressed? Cut the act, Emily, I interrupted, my voice rising. I saw you at the hotel. There was a brief pause, just enough for her mask to slip. What the hell were you doing following me? She spat, her tone flipping to anger. Not exactly the response of someone with nothing to hide, I shot back. Her silence was deafening. I left because I'm done playing the fool in whatever twisted little drama you've got going on, I said. I don't know who he is, and I don't care. But I won't stand here while you lie to my face and pretend everything's fine. You're overreacting, she said dismissively, as if I were a child throwing a tantrum. It's not what you think. That hotel was for a client meeting. Business, Dave. But of course, you're too insecure to trust me. Insecure? I barked out a humorless laugh. Lavender perfume, secret hotel trips, vanishing for hours, and I'm insecure? I don't have time for this, she snapped. Bring the kids home, or I'll call the police. Go ahead, I said, my voice cold. Tell them you abandoned your family for a business meeting. See how that plays out. She hung up, the silence more deafening than her words. For the first time, I wasn't the one chasing explanations. She was, and I wasn't done making her squirm. If Emily thought her vague threats would intimidate me, she was sorely mistaken. That evening, while the kids were asleep and Mike was engrossed in an action movie in the living room, I decided to dig deeper. My first step was trying that same number again, the one saved as Clara Work. This time, I had a plan. When the man answered with a simple, hello, I didn't hesitate. Hi, this is Dave, I said, keeping my tone steady and composed. I'm Emily's husband. The pause on the other end was brief, but it spoke volumes. What do you want? He asked, his earlier confidence noticeably shaken. Answers, I replied bluntly. Who are you, and what's your connection to my wife? That's none of your business, he shot back, though there was a clear hint of unease in his voice. Oh, but it is my business, I countered, pressing harder. She's been lying to both of us, hasn't she? You think she's yours? Let me guess. She's told you I'm the bad guy, that we're separated, that I'm some absentee father. Am I getting close? He didn't respond, but I heard the sharp exhale on the other end, like I'd hit him in the gut. Thought so, I said. Here's a tip. If she's lying to me, she's lying to you too. Before he could offer any excuses or a sob story, I ended the call. I wasn't interested in hearing his side of things. The next step was facing a piece of evidence I'd been avoiding. Early the next morning, I drove to the jewelry store listed on Emily's credit card statement, parking a few blocks away to stay inconspicuous. Inside, a clerk greeted me warmly, a middle-aged woman with a welcoming smile. Looking for something special today? She asked. Actually, I have a question, I replied, holding up Emily's credit card statement and pointing to the purchase. This charge, do you remember who made it? Her smile faltered, her demeanor shifting. I'm not sure I can help with that, she began. It's my wife's card, I interrupted firmly. I'm just trying to figure out why she was here. Please. She hesitated, then leaned in slightly, her voice dropping to a whisper as if sharing a secret. She came in with a man, she admitted. Tall, dark hair, very charming. They picked out a bracelet together. He paid part of it in cash, but the rest went on her card. The room felt like it was spinning. Emily had been buying jewelry with him while I was at home making dinner for our kids. My throat tightened, but I forced myself to ask, Do you remember what kind of bracelet it was? It was gold, she said, motioning to her wrist. Very elegant. She seemed happy. That word, happy, cut deeper than I expected. Thanks, I muttered, managing a tight smile as I turned to leave. The drive back to Mike's house felt endless, the storm of emotions inside me growing stronger with every passing mile. Each piece of the puzzle fell into place, sharper and more painful than the last. Emily wasn't just having an affair. She was building an entirely separate life. Hotel stays, expensive jewelry, and a man who probably thought he'd won some grand prize. When I walked into the house, Mike was waiting at the kitchen table, his expression grim. Well, he asked. She bought a bracelet, I said, collapsing into the chair across from him. Mike let out a low whistle. Damn, what are you gonna do? I don't know yet, I admitted, but my resolve was hardening. I'm not letting her get away with this. Right on cue, my phone buzzed. Emily again. This time, she'd sent a photo, a picture of her hand on the steering wheel, wearing the bracelet. The caption read, "Still think you know everything?" I stared at the screen, my anger simmering just beneath the surface. "She's trying to rattle you," Mike said, his voice calm but firm. "Show her you're not playing games." I nodded, a plan already forming. Emily thought she was in control, but she was about to learn otherwise. That evening, I made a call to Linda, a no-nonsense divorce lawyer who had helped a friend of mine. Known for her efficiency and skill in exposing deceit, she was the perfect ally. "Tell me everything," Linda said as I sat in her office the next morning. And I did, spilling every detail from the hotel visits to the bracelet and the mysterious number saved as Clara work. "She's not just cheating," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside. "She's living a double life, and I want it exposed." Linda nodded, jotting notes furiously. "Do you have proof?" I handed her screenshots of the credit card statement, the phone logs, and the photo of Emily flaunting the bracelet. "This is a good start," she said, looking up. "But if we're going to hit her where it hurts, we'll need more. Financial records, witnesses, anything that shows she's been lying about her commitments to you and the kids." "Consider it done," I replied, already plotting my next moves. Later that day, Mike greeted me with fresh intel of his own. "You're not going to believe this," he said, holding up his phone. "That number you called? The guy Emily's been talking to." "Yeah," I said, my fists clenching at the memory. "Turns out he's married too." Mike grinned, clearly savoring the irony. "Name's Ryan. Wife, 2 kids. Lives about 20 minutes away." The revelation hit me like a lightning bolt. Emily's affair wasn't just betrayal. It was a tangled web of lies so intricate it was amazing she hadn't tripped over it already. "This changes everything," I said, the pieces clicking into place. If Ryan's wife didn't know, she deserved to. And if she did, she might be the ally I needed. That evening, I parked outside Ryan's house, my heart pounding. When his wife answered the door, a blonde woman in her mid-30s holding a toddler, her polite smile quickly turned to wariness. "Can I help you?" she asked. "My name's Dave," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I think your husband is having an affair with my wife." Her eyes widened, the color draining from her face. "What?" "I know this is a lot," I said gently, "but I have proof. If you're willing to talk, I can show you everything." She hesitated, glancing back toward the house, then stepped outside and closed the door behind her. "Show me," she said, her voice trembling. I showed her the texts, the phone logs, and the photo of the bracelet. Her hands shook as she stared at the screen. "It's Emily, isn't it?" she whispered. "You know her?" I asked, surprised. "She's been a friend of Ryan's for a while," she said bitterly. "I've had my suspicions, but this confirms it. We talked for over an hour, piecing together the timeline of their affair. By the end, she was just as determined as I was to confront them. "I'll deal with Ryan," she said, her tone steely. "But if you're going after Emily, count me in." The plan was set. Emily and Ryan thought they were untouchable, that their secrets would stay buried. But their carefully crafted lies were about to collapse. She shouted, her voice rising in frustration. "Dave, are you seriously dragging random people into our private matters?" Then, turning sharply toward Danielle, she snapped, "And you really need to get a grip. Whatever your husband is doing has nothing to do with me." Danielle didn't back down. She calmly pulled out her phone and held it up. "Oh, really?" she said, her tone icy. "Because this looks an awful lot like your hand holding the bracelet." She shoved the photo toward Emily's face. Emily faltered, her confident facade cracking for a fleeting second before she straightened up, her composure returning. "You're all crazy," she hissed, her voice shaking slightly. "I don't owe anyone here an explanation." "No," I said, stepping closer and keeping my voice calm but firm. "But you owe me 10 years of my life back. And you owe our kids the truth." Her face twisted in anger. "Don't you dare drag the kids into this." "Oh, I'm bringing them into it," I said, my tone sharper now. "Because while you were off playing house with him, I pointed toward Ryan. I was at home cleaning up your messes and coming up with excuses for why their mom wasn't around. Ryan, sensing the confrontation was turning toward him, tried to intervene. This is getting out of hand, he said, his voice unsteady. We should all just... Danielle cut him off with a bitter laugh. Out of hand? You've been lying to my face for months, sneaking around with her, and now you want to play the voice of reason? Spare me. Emily turned back to me, her expression hardening. What do you even want, Dave, huh? You want me to grovel? Cry? Fine, I'm sorry. Is that what you wanted to hear? Does that make you happy now? No, I said, holding her gaze. I don't want an apology. I want accountability. And trust me, Emily, you're going to face it, whether you like it or not. The air between us grew tense, thick with unspoken words and unresolved anger. Danielle and I exchanged a look, silently agreeing it was time to leave. As we turned and walked away, leaving Emily and Ryan standing there exposed, I felt the smallest sense of relief. It wasn't over, not by a long shot, but it was the first crack in the carefully constructed facade they'd built. Emily didn't call after that confrontation at the park. For the first time in weeks, her silence felt like a victory. I could tell she was reeling, scrambling to regain her footing. Ryan, too, had gone quiet, likely too busy dealing with Danielle's wrath to think about anything else. But silence didn't mean peace. I could feel the storm brewing, and I was ready for it. Danielle and I spent the following days carefully planning our next steps. Her determination was fierce, and her anger was a driving force. She had already filed for divorce, citing infidelity and emotional abuse. Her lawyer was preparing to tear Ryan apart in court. Meanwhile, Linda and I continued gathering evidence to ensure I could protect my kids and strengthen my position legally. Then, Emily made her next move. It started with a letter, delivered by courier to Mike's house. The envelope was thick, the paper expensive. Inside was a formal notice from her lawyer, a request for mediation accompanied by a laundry list of demands. She wanted joint custody of the kids, half of our savings, and even a claim to Mike's property, arguing that it had been used as a marital residence. Are you kidding me? Mike exploded, slamming the letter onto the counter. She wants my house now? She's lost her damn mind. It's just a scare tactic, Linda said when I showed her the letter. She's hoping you'll panic and cave. Don't. We have her cornered, and she knows it. But Emily wasn't done. The very next day, she showed up unannounced at Mike's house, banging on the door like she owned the place. Mike answered, standing firm in the doorway. You've got some nerve showing up here, he said flatly. Where's Dave? She demanded, pushing past him without waiting for an invitation. Hearing the commotion, I stepped into the room. I forced my voice to remain calm. Emily, what do you want? You think you can throw me under the bus and come out of this squeaky clean? She hissed, her tone venomous. You've turned this into a circus, Dave. For what? Your pride? For the truth, I said evenly. Something you wouldn't recognize if it hit you in the face. Her eyes blazed with fury, but I could see her unraveling. She was losing control, and she knew it. This isn't over, she spat, jabbing a finger in my direction. I know you, Dave. I know every mistake you've made, every weakness. You're not untouchable. Her words were meant to intimidate me, but instead, they only solidified my resolve. Get out, Mike said, stepping between us. Before I call the police. Emily glared at him, then at me before storming out. The sound of her car screeching down the street was almost satisfying. Later that evening, Linda called with an update. We've got her, she said, her voice triumphant. The financial records, the phone logs, the photos, it's all there. She can't spin her way out of this. Hearing that felt like a weight lifting off my chest. Emily had underestimated me, just as she'd underestimated Danielle. She thought her lies and manipulation would shield her forever. But the walls were closing in. The day of mediation came quickly. Emily arrived dressed to impress, her black suit and high-priced attorney giving her an air of confidence. But I wasn't intimidated. If anything, her smugness only fueled my determination. The mediator, a calm woman in her 50s, began the session. Emily's lawyer leaned forward, his tone polished. My client is seeking a resolution that prioritizes the children's well-being while maintaining a fair division of assets. Translation: Emily wanted the money, the house, and as much time with the kids as possible. Linda didn't flinch. My client has evidence that Mrs. Roberts has engaged in behavior detrimental to the marriage, including infidelity and financial misconduct, she said, sliding a folder across the table. Emily's lawyer opened the folder, his expression shifting as he scanned the contents. Photos, text messages, phone logs, and a notarized statement from Danielle confirming the affair. This is absurd, Emily snapped, her composure cracking. None of this has anything to do with custody or the settlement. Oh, but it does, Linda countered smoothly. Your actions demonstrate a pattern of deceit and irresponsibility, which directly impacts your fitness as a parent. Emily's face twisted with fury. This is a setup, she spat. You're trying to ruin me. No, I said calmly. You did that all by yourself. In the end, the mediator sided with me. I retained full custody of the kids, the house, and the majority of our savings. Emily's demands were dismissed, her financial misconduct sealing her fate. As I walked out of the building, Emily stood by the entrance, her expression icy. You think you've won? She hissed. No, I said, meeting her gaze. The kids have won, and I'm making sure they never lose again. For the first time in years, I felt free. Emily's lies, her games, her control, they were finally over. It was just me and the kids now, starting fresh. And for the first time, I felt like we had a real chance at happiness. When I arrived, she was at the playground, chatting with the kids as if nothing had ever happened. Mommy! Our youngest yelled, sprinting toward her with excitement. My chest tightened, but I kept my composure. Emily, I said calmly as I approached. You're not allowed to be here. I just wanted to see them, she replied, her voice dripping with a false sweetness. You have designated visitation times, I stated firmly. You're aware of the arrangement. Her eyes flashed briefly with irritation, but she managed to force a tight smile. Don't be like this, Dave. The kids need their mom. They also need stability, I responded, keeping my voice low so the kids couldn't hear. Showing up unannounced like this doesn't help. Emily opened her mouth, clearly ready to argue, but a teacher's sudden presence interrupted her. Is everything all right here? The teacher asked, her tone polite but carrying a note of authority. Yes, I answered quickly. We were just leaving. Emily glared at me, but didn't press the issue. As she walked away, a heavy mixture of relief and sadness settled over me. The woman I had once deeply loved now felt like a stranger, a toxic presence I needed to shield my kids from. That night, I contacted my lawyer, Linda, and filed a formal report to document Emily's violation of the visitation agreement. Linda reassured me that this, paired with her erratic behavior, would only strengthen our case if she ever tried to contest custody again. For the first time, I felt as though this chapter of my life was starting to close. While Emily's chaos might never completely vanish, I was learning how to endure it, how to protect myself and the kids without letting her drag us back into the storm. We were moving forward, and no matter what she did next, I knew one thing for certain. She wouldn't win. Weeks passed, and the turmoil seemed to ease. Emily's attempts to disrupt our lives became less frequent, though the occasional cryptic text or passive-aggressive remark still found its way to my phone. I ignored them. She thrived on attention, and withholding it felt like the ultimate form of revenge. The kids adapted remarkably well to the new routine. Occasionally, they'd ask about their mom, but I kept my answers simple and reassuring. She loves you, I'd say, leaving it at that. They didn't need to know the details, at least not yet. Then, the email came. It arrived on a Monday morning, disguised as an official work correspondence. The subject line read, "Important documents urgent." I opened it and immediately felt my stomach drop. Attached was a file labeled Custody Appeal. Emily was trying to gain custody of the kids. I forwarded the email to Linda and called her right away. She's filing for joint custody again, I said, pacing the kitchen. Linda's voice was sharp but calm. This time, she's claiming parental alienation. She's accusing you of turning the kids against her. That's absurd, I said, running a hand through my hair. I've done everything I can to shield them from this mess. She's desperate, Linda replied, and desperation makes people unpredictable. But don't worry, we have what we need to counter this. The hearing was scheduled 2 weeks later, and I spent every moment preparing. I went over evidence, practiced potential responses, and worked with Linda to ensure we covered every angle. True to her promise, Danielle agreed to testify. She provided a detailed account of Emily's affair with Ryan and the emotional fallout it had caused. When the hearing day arrived, the courtroom buzzed with quiet tension. Emily sat across from me, dressed sharply in a tailored blazer. Her expression was carefully composed, but I could sense the underlying arrogance. Her lawyer, a polished man who exuded confidence, sifted through his notes like someone accustomed to winning. But Linda was more than prepared. Emily's attorney began with a glowing portrayal of her as a devoted mother who had been unfairly excluded from her children's lives. He argued that my refusal to allow unscheduled visits was evidence of me poisoning the children against her. I kept my face neutral, though anger simmered beneath the surface. When it was our turn, Linda calmly dismantled their argument piece by piece. She presented evidence of Emily's erratic behavior, poor financial decisions, and repeated disregard for court orders. She read aloud the threatening and accusatory text messages Emily had sent me. Then Danielle took the stand. Her testimony was devastating. She outlined Emily's affair with Ryan, the deceit, and the way their actions had unraveled both families. Danielle described Emily's attempts to manipulate Ryan, even after the affair was exposed, painting a picture of someone unfit to prioritize her children's well-being. For the first time, Emily's composure wavered. Her lawyer objected multiple times, but the damage was done. When the judge finally delivered her ruling, the courtroom went silent. The evidence demonstrates a pattern of behavior inconsistent with the children's best interests, the judge stated firmly. Mr. Roberts will retain full custody, and Mrs. Roberts' supervised visitation will remain in place, pending a review in 6 months. Emily's face twisted in fury and disbelief. She opened her mouth as if to argue, but her lawyer placed a hand on her arm, stopping her. As I left the courtroom, I felt an enormous weight lift off my shoulders. Danielle caught up with me in the hallway, her expression triumphant. "You did it," she said. "No," I corrected her. "We did it." Emily glared at me from across the room, but remained silent. For once, her silence felt like a victory. On the drive home, I glanced in the rearview mirror at the kids, who were chattering about school, blissfully unaware of the drama that had just unfolded. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to feel hope. Emily's storm might still linger, but for now, the skies were clear. I was determined to protect the peace we had fought so hard to achieve. The next morning, the house was quiet, not the oppressive, uneasy silence I'd grown accustomed to, but a peaceful stillness. The kids bounded into the kitchen with their boundless energy. "Dad, can we have pancakes?" my youngest asked, her grin lighting up the room. "Pancakes it is," I said, smiling as I grabbed the flour. For once, my mind wasn't preoccupied with Emily's schemes or courtroom battles. I was fully present, flipping pancakes and laughing at their silly jokes. Later, I sat with them in the living room, ready to have a conversation I'd been putting off. "I want to talk to you about your mom," I began gently. Their chatter quieted as they gave me their full attention. "You know how sometimes adults don't always get along?" I asked. They nodded. "Well, your mom and I had some problems, and that's why we're living apart now. But none of it is your fault." "Does Mom hate us?" my oldest asked quietly, his worried eyes cutting into me. "Nobody," I said, pulling him into a hug. "Your mom loves you very much. She's just going through some things, and I'm making sure you're happy and safe. That's what matters most." They accepted the explanation, and I promised to always be honest with them when they were ready to hear the truth. That evening, I sat on the porch with Mike. He handed me a beer, and we watched the stars in comfortable silence. "You did good," he said after a while. "Thanks," I replied. "But it's not over." "It never is," he said with a shrug. "But you're handling it." And I was. Emily's chaos still lingered at the edges of our lives, but my focus had shifted to building a stable, happy future for the kids. Over time, the tension eased. The kids talked less about Emily and more about new friends, school, and our new dog, Max, who had quickly become the heart of our home. One night, as I tucked the kids into bed, my youngest looked up and said, "I like it here. It feels happy." Her words hit me like a bolt of lightning, and I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Me too, kiddo," I said, kissing her forehead. Me too. The road ahead wasn't perfect. It never is. But for the first time, I wasn't walking it alone. This was our life now, and it was ours to build, one day at a time.